welcome back to KMSU Inside Out. This is our 4th edition of Inside Out, and sadly we will not be here for a couple weeks considering we have spring break next week, and then we are off campus for another couple weeks after that. So make sure you stay tuned, extra focused today because we are not going to be back for a while.
Yeah, just because of some recent developments, the university just wants to make sure that we're safe and everything, and we really appreciate that. And it'll just be a couple of weeks of just not seeing us for a bit.
We'll be back.
But we'll be back. We'll have some stories to share, that's for sure.
Yes.
But also kind of just going right into our show. Last week, the Minot State football team announced that they are making a new addition to the coaching staff. And with more on the story, standing by is Philip Green, who is in Herb Parker Stadium's press box. So Philip, what do you got?
Coming off his 8th season coaching in the Canadian Football League, he decided to take his talents back to the college football ranks. Joining me now is new Minot State football defensive coordinator, Coach Mike Shepper. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Philip.
As I mentioned, you're a recent defensive coordinator addition here for the Beavers. What made you decide to come join the Beavers this season?
It was a great opportunity for me to expand my growth as a coach, to coordinate and lead a unit of defense in this case, and to call plays eventually.
As I mentioned, you coached for several years in the Canadian Football League. What is the biggest difference between the Canadian Football League and coming back to the college ranks?
Well, first things first, going from 12 players on each side to 11, which is always a nice start, getting back to normal numbers that I'm familiar with, coming from the United States originally. But ultimately, ball is ball. It's both the outdoor game, and ultimately I'm excited about being at this level again in the NCAA.
As I mentioned, this is your first opportunity to call plays defensively and be a defensive coordinator. What do you look most forward to as a defensive coordinator this season?
To display leadership to the unit and help them become better players and better men.
In the Canadian Football League, there's a lot of people don't understand the major differences players are there. What would you say from what you've coached there? How different are players up there versus down here?
Players are typically smaller than the traditional pro model. NFL players are going to be bigger, more confined spaces. And in the Canadian Football League, it's a wider field, it's a longer playing surface, and again, touched on 12 players on each side to help mitigate that distance issue. But you're going to have smaller players, and also with rules such as the 20-second play clock versus the NFL clock, it's faster pace, so you're typically going to have smaller players, more agile, and better conditioned.
Thank you. As I mentioned again, this is Coach Mike Shepper, new defensive coordinator for the Beavers. Make sure to come out to some football games this fall and catch Coach Shep on the sideline. Back to you in the studio, Eleni.
With the coronavirus being declared a pandemic as of recently, universities around the country have taken much needed precautionary actions. And with me today is Director of University Communications, Michael Linnell. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So just to get into it without the fluff. So as the Director of University Communications, how has your job changed since something as big as this has happened?
Sure. It's certainly in the last 2 weeks, we've done a lot of work on trying to prepare for this as much as you can. It's kind of unprecedented. There isn't a lot of things out there that we can use as ways people are handling this before. Things are coming up minute by minute that we have to deal with. So it's certainly created a lot more work. The university has a really good plan for various issues that come up. We have an emergency operations plan that's in place, and while this isn't specifically listed as that, there's a lot of things from that plan that we can take and use. So it's been a lot of meetings, there's been a lot of discussion, and then we get to today where there's actually a little bit more kind of action and things happening specifically. But so it's changed my world in the fact that we have met a lot and discussed a lot and tried to come up with every scenario possible.
Well, it sounds like you've been really busy, and I know that you've been getting a ton of emails